Wonder Woman, a character I think we're all both excited and nervous to see, finally realized on the big screen in 2016 by Gal Gadot in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Yeah, that's a mouthful, and I think that hints at the complicated task that Warner Brothers has before it as they try to define a lot of characters in a very short amount of time, basically at the same time. And Wonder Woman is one of those characters. But she's getting her own movie in 2017 and is definitely a focal point for what Warner Brothers is trying to do with their DC properties. For instance, it was recently announced that she's going to be a major part of the merchandising campaign for Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which would certainly be a pleasant surprise, as she isn't really included in the advertising campaign so far for the movie. Her image was one of the images released at Comic-Con last year, which was met with much fanfare, but things have gone pretty quiet since then. Still, we see her movie taking shape. It had a director, then it got a new director, and of course the rumor that Chris Pine is in talks for Steve Trevor. But very little talk about Wonder Woman herself, which is why I was so excited earlier this week to see a number of photos for her costume pop up online from the licensing expo where Warner Brothers had a major presence. I think they had a bigger presence pretty much than everybody else who showed up, so there's some merchandising right there. Although they didn't have any merchandising for Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice just yet, but they had the Batmobile, the new Batmobile on display, as well as the costumes for the DC Trinity on display. Now, we'd seen these earlier from the Warner Brothers studio tour. Photos had popped up online, but nothing like this new grouping of photos, which goes into much more detail on the Wonder Woman costume, which, by the way, also has a lot of detail in the costume itself. The Superman and Batman costumes are not only, I think, more simplistic by comparison, but we've seen them before. Now this though, is our very first up-close and personal look at the Wonder Woman costume, and I have to say, I really, really like it. So I'm very excited to have something else positive once more to talk about when it comes to DC movies, and especially with a character that, again, I'm very nervous for. I guess first we'll talk about that before we dive into the photos. Now, I think that Warner Brothers has a real opportunity on their hands here to swoop in and steal Black Widow's thunder. Of course, that's a character that everybody just absolutely loves and feels that Marvel and Kevin Feige aren't treating, respectfully enough, both in the way she was depicted in Avengers: Age of Ultron. A lot of anger directed at Joss Whedon for what he did with the character. From certain groups, I liked the way the character was portrayed, although I do see where those complaints come from. I understand them, even if I don't agree with them. And then also, everybody wants a Black Widow movie. And for instance, they recently had the Flash Mob, We Want Widow, hashtag We Want Widow. And then, of course, Where's Natasha has also been another popular hashtag talking about the merchandising problems and that she's not included in all the merchandise for Avengers: Age of Ultron. And again, Warner Brothers is hoping to show Marvel up by including Wonder Woman in their merchandise for Batman v Superman. But I have to say, Zack Snyder has a horrible track record with female characters, right up there with Christopher Nolan. Although Christopher Nolan, I think, at the end of the day, redeemed himself quite a bit with Anne Hathaway's Catwoman, who turned out to be a pretty interesting character and something I think we all would have liked to have seen more of, but that's a whole different conversation on how the Nolan-verse, the Nolan-Batman-verse was cut down before, it really could enjoy its prime. But anyway, Zack Snyder, I think, has a very bad track record with female characters, and for instance, what he did with Silk Spectre in the Watchmen movie was unfortunate. And Malin Ackerman, while she looked great in the costume, just really didn't have the acting chops, I think, to bring that character to life the way many would have liked to have seen it be done. And I think that Gal Gadot, we don't know her acting ability. She's really only been in the 2 Fast and Furious films, where she did a nice job. She acquitted herself nicely, but she certainly didn't blow anybody out of the water. And when she stopped being in those films, nobody complained. It wasn't like Michelle Rodriguez. So I hope this isn't a Malin Ackerman type situation, right? I think if Charlize Theron was wearing this, especially post Mad Max Fury Road, we'd all feel a heck of a lot better. But anyway, we're going to go over the look of the costume, which looks great, and I just hope that the person wearing it, again, Gal Gadot, does this costume justice. So we have good sign after good sign when it comes to this movie, but yet we're still so nervous about it. And I think that's because Wonder Woman's just a tricky character in general, even in comics. On a side note, we're going to get into these pictures in just a moment, but I actually had a conversation with someone from DC a little bit ago, not a long time ago, but maybe I'd say a year or so ago, and they said even within DC, there is a disagreement on how to depict the character. You know, there's like the warrior for peace, and then there's like just the badass warrior. And there's just a real divide, even internally. So I think that that can be seen in a character that isn't particularly well defined. All right, so anyway, let's get started. Now we're starting here with two pictures. You see the Wonder Woman picture that was debuted at Comic-Con, Gal Gadot in character, which I think we had mixed reactions to. I know that I did. And then here's the overall look of the costume at the licensing expo. And you can see that they look nothing alike. I don't quite understand why the mannequin would look so different than Gal Gadot in the costume. Now, of course, there's a serious filter over the Gal Gadot photo, and one has to wonder if that is the coloring that Zack Snyder will be going with in the actual movie. I much prefer the more colorful version that's on display at the licensing expo. I think it has the muted colors that Warner Brothers and DC like so much for their movies, but still is familiar enough as something from the comics. So it's both familiar and new. Whereas the other one I think is more familiar in terms of Zack Snyder movies, right? It looks very similar to the 300 films, and you know, all those kind of like Roman sandals epics as of late. And so I much prefer the colorful version. And also that mannequin is supposed to look somewhat like Gal Gadot, but doesn't quite. I also think the mannequin's hair looks much better, and to the point that if Gal Gadot needs a wig, she needs a wig, right? It's an interesting situation as we move forward with female characters. You know, they're going to have to find actors of the same caliber as those playing the male characters, and I'm talking like Robert Downey Jr. Situation here, Tom Hiddleston. I know that Chris Evans and Chris Hemsworth don't have quite the acting chops as some of the other male actors, and I'm sure some of you will point that out, but I think Gal Gadot is, well, she's probably on the Chris Evans level, you know, so to speak, and he certainly has proven himself as Steve Rogers. So let's get into the details, though, but I'm just curious, at first glance, which costume do you prefer? Which version of it? Do you prefer the natural lighting one or the filtered one? All right, I don't understand why the costumes look so much better on this mannequin. It's crazy. Even the weapons look better. All right, and as you're about to see. Now moving on here, I started with this photo first with the lasso. You know, the lasso of truth. It's supposed to glow, and it looks kind of dull in the Comic-Con photo, right? But here, even in the natural light, it does, you know, really stand out, and I like the realism of this costume, by the way. Now, I know that nobody would ever dress like this in, you know, the Greco-Roman era, but it doesn't seem totally out of context, right? It seems somewhat believable. And I like that her rope looks like a real rope, right? I mean, it's a magical rope that has certain magical qualities, obviously, and for those of you not familiar, whenever she lassos anyone with it, they're compelled to speak the truth. It's such a girly power. It's like, you know, like talking to animals, which I believe Wonder Woman could do at some point as well, and why Michelle McLaren ended up leaving, because she wanted a tiger to follow Wonder Woman around. But, you know, you want to avoid, like, the Saturday morning cartoon tropes of a female superheroine, right? She's got to be as cool as Batman and Superman. But I think the rope looks very good, and I like the way that it's just, you know, I like the utilitarianism of her weapons, right? They're just on there, right? She's got a rope, and I think that looks really, really good. I like the stance, by the way, of this mannequin as well. The stance of the mannequin is also much better than Gal Gadot. Boy, Gal Gadot, if a mannequin does a better job playing Wonder Woman than you, that's embarrassing. All right, so next up, it gets even cooler, all right? But I thought the lasso was a nice place to start. I love the boots. I called them hooker boots when the photo first came out from Comic-Con, and I wish that I had seen this aspect to them, although they look a little bit different. That photo just did not do this costume justice. I love two separate aspects about these boots. The first is, my favorite is the slit down the side. So cool. Just from a fashion perspective, it's really nice. I mean, I'm like, I'd wear that. I mean, it's just super cool. I think it also gives more of the image of that this is armor. Like, it's not even though it's cool from a fashion perspective, it's not a fashion choice for Wonder Woman. These are armor plates that are tied onto her legs and just look like boots. You know, similar to a lot of what soldiers actually wore in Greco-Roman times. So I think that's really awesome. So it's both high fashion, but realistic, which is the best of both worlds. I also think it plays into the idea that she's used to fighting in a hot climate, right? Which is why she's not overly dressed, right? It plays into the whole armor battle. She's like, hey, you know what? I come from an old-time civilization, the Mascara, an Amazon culture, and, you know, I'm wearing these clothes because I need to wear armor, and that's really the only purpose for my wearing clothes. It plays into some of the stylistic choices that are made and makes them more palatable to, I think, modern moviegoers. So I love the slit, I love the breathability, that's also very good, and the movement that it allows, right? The armored plates don't have to clash into each other, it gives her some movement. So I just think it looks absolutely fantastic. I also like a wedge heel. I think the heel is a little bit unrealistic. I understand that aesthetically it looks better, but I think that nobody would fight in heels. It just absolutely makes no sense. I mean, her toes are going to kill her after about 30 minutes on the battlefield unless she takes sitting breaks. But still, a wedge heel is a lot better than an actual heel. And Black Widow also sports wedge heels. But I think that the boot looks fantastic. Here's also the knee pad. Black Widow also is taken to having knee pads on her costume, but I think this also looks very good. It has more of an armored aspect to it. It plays into the believability. I also like the colors on this. That red looks very good. And I also like that the scratches are built in here. There's a similarity with the situation with Batman's costume. It also has scratches in it. And so I like that these people are battle worn. Like, hey, you know what? I don't just, you know, talk the talk, but I walk the walk. So I think that adds like a level of credibility to them at first glance. So I really like that quite a bit. Now, next up, what a sword, right? It looks so much better than when Gal Gadot is holding it in that photo. And I just love that she has you know, Batman for the new Batman costume that Ben Affleck's wearing, he just has like this utility belt that looks like it doesn't really hold anything, right? It's got a few little compartments on it, but it doesn't look like he means business. You know, that's fine. I'm not critiquing the Batman uniform at all, but I like that with Wonder Woman, everything makes sense. It's like, it's organic, it's natural, and she looks like a warrior outfitted for battle. So I love, I don't know how this is going to come off though. I don't know why it's not sheathed. I mean, good luck trying to unsnap that stuff. Maybe when you pull on it, it just comes off really easily. But then your enemies could acquire your sword easily as well. So I think, come to think of it, there should be a sheath there where she puts it. But, you know, that's nitpicking, right? And I know some of you say sometimes I'm a nitpicker, but I just demand quality. But I'm going to let this one go because the rest of the costume's so great. So I also love that there's writing on the sword and also the handle. I think that that's going to add to the mythology of the character. Remember, Wonder Woman is chosen as the champion of her people. Diana is chosen. She wins a contest to represent the Amazon people in man's world. So she's not just fighting for herself or a cause that she personally believes in or something that drives her, but she's very much an ambassador. So she's representing her people's culture, and you see that in her costume, which is also a great bit of detail. And you know, that's what's a good costume portrays the character at first glance, you know, visually. And that's what I also like about this costume so much. So it looks great. All right, let's see here. I wonder how she's going to keep her hair from getting tangled in her sword. We'll see. I mean, that's fixed with Black Widow with the shorter haircut, although only Joss Whedon is willing to go with that. The Russo brothers want, you know, Vidal Sassoon hair, curly or straight, depending on the movie. But so we'll see how Wonder Woman handles it. Now, next up, I've saved the most ornate for last, and that's her shield. Now, on one side here, I love that it's clearly made that she has to hold on to her arm. Now, she doesn't have the beneficial situation of Cap with his shield, and then it has that cool magnetized thing that it can come up to his wrist like that. We've seen that on display in a couple of movies now. It's very cool, but of course that kind of technology doesn't exist with the Amazon people. Sometimes it does. They had like that purple ray for a while on Themyscira, but clearly they're going with a more old school Wonder Woman here, which I appreciate. So I love that it not only has the straps for her to hold on to, but it's got 3 of them. And they're actually belts, as you can see. But it has three such straps to add more support. So I think that's really cool, and shows that she's going to get she intends to get a lot of use out of it. It's not just there for show. I think the size looks very good here as well. In the first picture, let me just check it for reference. Yeah, she doesn't have the shield in the first picture, but I think the size is good. It seems a little bit smaller than Cap's shield, but I think it has to be a little bit more wieldy for Wonder Woman. Also, I think she's going to use it in a very different way than Captain America obviously uses his shield. His shield is aerodynamic. He uses it in a frisbee sense. You're not going to see that with Wonder Woman. She's going to be more hardcore warrior. So it looks great. But then here also on the front, you see these 2 pictures, there's writing on it, which I think is really fascinating. You can't quite make it out. I've seen some people say that maybe Cleopatra is written on here. I don't think that's likely. Maybe it's the names of other Amazon warriors, though. That does make sense, especially because, again, this is the Amazon champion, and of course, maybe she's not the first one to fulfill the role. The first one to go to man's world, but maybe not the first one to be the head. Maybe it's like former Amazon rulers. I think that this is another great little nod to the history of the character and her people. So that's our in-depth look at the Wonder Woman costume. I'm curious to what you think of it. Do you think it looks as good as I do? And what do you think of the fact that it's so much more ornate than the Batman and Superman costumes? And with this impressive costume, do you think that Gal Gadot can fill these awesome, fashionable boots appropriately? And do you think, finally, that Wonder Woman and Warner Brothers in DC could take advantage of the thirst for a strong Black Widow representation that Marvel just isn't giving? And Captain Marvel, of course, is coming down the line, but not before Wonder Woman. And I think that there is a genuine opportunity here. But let's hope that Warner Brothers and DC don't mess it up, so that people like Isaac Perlmutter, who runs Marvel, can send another email to Sony saying, "See? Nobody likes female comic book movies." And it's like, no, people don't like bad comic book movies about a male or a female character. All right, so I look forward to continuing the conversation with you down below, and you can check out some other episodes right now.